Hello, and welcome back to The Pursuit. I am Pastor Cameron Martin. Today, we are going to jump right in with a message that I'm calling Where is the Love? I probably don't need to intro it any more than that. If you have been watching any news or social media recently, and who knows, years to come, this may be just as applicable, but right now it seems particularly keenly felt. First, let me just say, no one is ever just saying. You know, when you've heard people use that expression, hey, just saying, usually it follows somebody expressing something not all that flattering, like you're kind of a know-it-all and your wife's got a big nose. Hey, just saying, as if that takes away any responsibility from whoever is saying it to maybe it's just words. Hey, just saying something that everyone's thinking, even though it's unkind or hurtful. Words have power. Biblically, we already know that. Words and communication are relationship. If we are going to love someone on this planet, it will be largely known by words. Can't be only known by words. For example, no one ends up at the altar to be married after saying nothing. Can't not do anything. There has to be some action attached to it, of course, but there has to be specifics communicated. Actions can communicate large ideas, but very specific ideas only get communicated in words. And so us exchanging words is not only communication, it is how humans interface. It's how we share what's in our heart to see if we are on common ground. It's how we show or communicate compassion and how we end up on the same page. Even using a term like speaking the same language. It's because we know that the other person communicating that cares for us and has our best interests at heart. Even when somebody does something kind for us, sometimes inside we're thinking, why are you doing this? We can't communicate that in just action. Somebody has to say, how come you're helping me? How come you're being so kind? Gives the other person the opportunity to say, I feel like you could use some help, or I saw you were struggling here, or felt like God just told me to come over and see if I could support you. The English term communication has been evolved from the Latin communis and communicare. Surprising, and see where that's going? Communicare. They are two Latin words related to the word communication. Communis is a noun, which means common, communality, or sharing. So it starts with the idea of sharing and having something, I don't want to use the word again, but common ground, having something together. Similarly, communicare is a verb, which means to make something common, to make something shared. So the idea of communication would say there has to be some overlapping of goals and motives, but it also, even though we're talking about words for the most part, it means that there has to be an action associated with it, which would show that we actually care, communicare. So these roots seem to imply that when we endeavor to communicate, we engage in a common caring. A common caring. So we either care for one another or we join together and care for someone else. This is just in the idea of exchanging mostly words. Today we're going to focus more on words. Communicating. So communication is relationship. If we truly believe we are communicating, it must include an element of valuing the person we are engaged with to a greater degree than simply demanding they acknowledge our superior intellect and education. So communicating even like this, where I am put together an idea. I've prayed, I've researched, I've organized, and now I'm communicating something. This is just one way, though. And I think when we do things via text, online, we want to convince ourselves that we're having a conversation. And although it's possible, I think most of you will agree with me, it's so seldom that we probably shouldn't ever think that that's what's happening. So if we believe we're communicating, it must include an element of valuing the person we're engaged with. Right now, I'm valuing all who might want to join in this common idea of pursuing God, pursuing others, and pursuing the kingdom of heaven. I'm valuing that God values others enough to try to speak specifically through me to them, taking more than just his broad actions, which we can see and recognize that he cares for humanity, but also that specifics come when we communicate via words. And if it just is about me communicating how much I know or how I think other people should behave, then that's going to come across and no one will listen to this or listen to me in other venues. And so when we engage online and in social media, if we're just, I don't think anybody is thinking to themselves, I just got to be right and somebody has to acknowledge how right I am. But I think we all can see that that is so common, that obviously you post something and it could be seemingly innocuous, and then so pretty soon people are arguing in the comments. We even say in some of our posts, I don't care to have this become an argument, and yet it doesn't take hardly anything before somebody is just demanding that the other person acknowledge that they're right and that they are more informed, or that their opinion is no longer an opinion, it is actually fact, indisputably. So if we are not upset about something else and taking it out on others, we are certainly not filled with the love of God and Spirit of God and taking that out on others. Right now, I think we're so stirred up with what's going on around us, it's hard for it not to come through in an edgy and callous and hard delivery. But even if we're able to avoid that right now, I don't see a lot of the Spirit of God and Spirit of love and peace and kindness coming out onto others, that we're not showering others with that and spending that on others online. Many are familiar with 1 Corinthians. If you've been to a wedding, if you've been to somebody's house that's a believer, you might even have seen it on their walls. Love is patient, love is kind. And that's what we think of when we think of 1 Corinthians 13. But this is how the chapter starts. Paul says, if I could speak in all the languages of the earth and of angels, talk about a broad statement, but didn't love others, I would only be a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. If I had the gift of prophecy and I understood all of God's secret plans and possessed all knowledge, and if I had such faith that I could move mountains, but I didn't love others, I would be nothing. If I gave everything I had to the poor and even sacrificed my body, I could boast about it, but if I didn't love others, I would have gained nothing. This pretty much includes everybody. Those who are super smart and educated, speaking all languages, those who are super spiritual and even can speak on behalf of angels, those who can speak clearly what God is saying and understand all of his secret plans. It even says, if I possessed all knowledge. I mean, it just becomes laughable that he felt like this was necessary to say to that church and that we would have this. Or even those who would say, I don't propose to be a know-it-all and I'm not super spiritual. I don't even know if I believe in God, but I just know you have to do the right thing and be good to people. He's also saying to them, if I give everything I have to the poor and sacrifice my body, I could boast about it, but if I didn't actually love others, still the end result is nothing. Many of us are very stirred up right now But can I suggest that we probably don't need to spend time researching evidence to make a case and win a debate? And we just see so much of this online in response to people being really hurt and being beyond hopeless. Rather, that time would be better spent instead of looking for reasons why we're right and finding an article that supports our case or finding a meme that shows somebody in a funny and snarky way how wrong they are and how right we are. Rather, that time would be better spent determining how in the world, in the midst of all this turmoil, are we able to maintain a heart of love toward others? If we believe in and follow Jesus and have been baptized with the Holy Spirit, we should be supernaturally equipped to love and persevere in any and all circumstances, including all that's going on right now. That should be particularly true when interacting with someone created by God in his image that he sent his son to die for, which is everyone. It's those who are angry with us. It's those who are generalizing about entire people groups. It's those who are lashing out, and it's those who are silent. It's everyone. Everyone has been created in the image of God and is someone who he sent his son to die for. And if he valued them that much, then we should keep that in mind when we're taking the easy, lazy route to relationship that we call communication or social media. We need to find a way through this shell the world creates around our hearts so that we can find love and compassion again. The Bible instructs us to weep with those who weep, and just a reminder that the word compassion means common suffering. And in the Bible, it's almost always used when someone has a feeling but is moved by that feeling to action, not simply moved to speak. Does anyone know you care? We just have to ask ourselves that. In all of our efforts to be heard and to communicate, does anyone know you care? Do they only know how smart you are, which may be true, or how often you're correct, or how clever you are? In James 1, 19 through 21, he says, "Understand this, my dear brothers and sisters, you must all be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. Human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. So," and he continues on, I'll come back to that in a second. Pausing here, quick to listen, and he puts that first. Slow to speak, we're going to come back to some of this, and slow to get angry. Because that human, maybe we're thinking of it as not anger, but that emotion where we're getting stirred up and we're, I can't believe somebody's saying that about what I should do and why I'm not and what I have to do, and I'm going to show them, and we start typing online. Human anger, that feeling, that reaction from our flesh and not response from our spirit, does not produce the righteousness God desires. So even if we think we're going to get a good result, ultimately we really should want a healthy result that is good for everyone involved. And that would be the same result that God desires. And so if James is telling us that isn't going to get the result that God desires, it really isn't going to make us feel better in the end. He continues, "So get rid of all the filth and evil in your lives and humbly accept the word God has planted in your hearts, for it has the power to save your souls." Interesting that he essentially is saying, if we are stirred up and we feel the need to quickly speak and listen second, and we are quickly offended, then he's saying there's something sick inside of you. There's a sickness, and we all have it. We're all prone to it. That's why we have to have this old creation that we were born with has to be done away with and overcome by the Spirit of God inside of us. So What James is saying is, if we allow ourselves to speak out of our flesh when we're provoked, we're not speaking at his prompting or on his behalf, but on behalf of something evil and filthy inside of us and prideful. Because he says, get rid of all the filth and evil in your lives and humbly accept what God has placed inside us. And he's implying it has the power to save us, so why not offer that to someone else? Okay. There's our intro. So, I'm not saying I'm perfect at this, but I have a decent amount of experience in communicating. It's what I've done for my entire adult life and career, even in the different jobs I've done. It's always been communication. So, here are a few things that I humbly submit to help the situation when we communicate with one another, because communication is relationship. It's how we pursue others. It's how we interface with God. It's how we bring the kingdom to bear. We speak his word and see change on earth as it is in heaven. So, first one is, just like James just said, listen first. And listen for understanding, not clarity. Many who think that they are good communicators will have already heard the idea of listen for understanding. I think we misunderstand that idea. We think if I am quiet enough, long enough, I'll hear clearly what the words are coming toward me. And I'll know I won't misspeak when I just decide to have my say. That's not what it means. If we're listening for understanding and not clarity, that's just clarity. It's not to be certain that we hear their words, but that we understand why they are bothering to communicate and what they hope to gain from being vulnerable enough to initiate change. Most of the time when it really matters and we're communicating things that really make a difference, we are going to have to risk the idea that the other person might not respond or respond poorly. So when we're listening for understanding, we want to hear what the person is feeling that motivated them to start the conversation at all. What are they trying? What is their goal for the conversation? Not just what they're saying. Because if we're wise and discerning, we'll see past what they're saying and maybe see what they are trying to communicate, because we don't all do it well. And we aren't all speaking the exact same language, even if we're speaking the same specific language. So, and then we can ask questions to make sure it sounds like you're saying, we're not saying, I'm hearing you say these words. We're saying, I feel like you are communicating that there is a hurt or you'd like something to be different, and you thought it was important enough to risk me blowing up or saying you're an idiot or get over it, enough to see that change come so that we can all be better. Because even if we are the one that's being communicated to doesn't care about the situation, the other person obviously cares enough that they are willing to head off what is probably going to be a conflict or an abandonment, a dissolution of the relationship. So they're risking, and we should give them the grace and try to help them help us understand. So listen for understanding, not clarity. Remember that when we're communicating online and we're talking about something that doesn't involve us personally, and even sometimes when it does, we communicate it in such a way that we imply that the idea we have belongs to us and we came up with the idea. So the tip here is, just keep in mind, it's not your idea. Almost none of us communicate an idea that is completely original and came from us, so that if somebody resists it or says, oh, that's stupid, that we should take it personally because it's our idea. So when you discover an idea that you agree with or you feel passionate about, don't get married to it. It's not yours, so don't take it personal. All of us are continuing to learn and discover our position and viewpoint. So try looking at it as, I tend to agree with the idea that, or I'm drawn to the idea that, and then you acknowledge that you found this idea. It seems to make sense to you right now with what you know, but it also invites other people to test the idea. Ideally, so that you can say, you know what? This idea could use some work, or I'll bet there's a better idea. And it also protects our pride from getting damaged and needing to be right or resist changing our mind or looking informed or worse, because this is our idea. And so if it gets attacked, human nature is to protect the idea. No, don't do this. And no, now I can't give up here because I've got to be right. Otherwise my idea makes me look bad if it's not right or good or helpful. If it's not your idea and you can just say, oh, you know what? I hadn't thought of that. Kaboom, and dump the idea and move on. I mean, wouldn't you prefer to have a better idea? Don't we all want a better idea? There's a song from a band called Mute Math. It's called The Nerve. And the opening line is, can you believe this world has the nerve to insist it won't trade for a better one? I love that. Stirs me up. Looking at all that's going on around us right now, are we really going to hold on tight to this? Honestly. So, listen first. Remember, it's not your idea. And remember, we are not all-knowing. Whether you think you are the smartest person you know, you might be the smartest person you know. I don't know. You may be way smarter than me. Likely that you are. However, the Bible says we know in part and we see in part. It also says that we need to renew our minds. So that implies that there's more to know. And honestly, those verses tell us there is stuff that we will never understand here on earth. It will only be revealed to us later. It's why we need that relationship with God. It's why we need to seek God. But that tells us that the idea that we have intellectually arrived while on this planet is not biblical. It's not possible then, in my mind. If we're talking about biblical ideas, the idea that you have arrived intellectually is not possible. So, if we acknowledge we are not all-knowing, that means somebody else is going to have a piece of information we don't have. That's why God built us all different and wired us all different. And that's why he doesn't tell us everything. Because as soon as we had that, we just say, oh, good, I'm good. I don't need anybody else. And we would look for people to serve us in our God-likeness. But what we really need is other people to show us a viewpoint or a perspective or a facet of any situation or idea that we couldn't see from our perspective based on our history or based on their history. They're better suited to tell us or show us or help us understand. And if we value others, we value what God has created them to be and what he's placed inside them for us. So the next point is, do we care enough to be communicating in the first place? So listen first. Remember, it's not your idea. Remember that none of us are all-knowing. And do we care enough to even be trusted to be communicating? If you are texting or communicating online, like I said earlier, you are not having a conversation. There's so much missing from the communication, just from that venue. It's not possible to be as complete in our communication as we are when we are in the same room together. So if you truly care, you will find a way to communicate in person. This is particularly true if you know ahead of time that you don't see eye to eye, or if there is friction or a potential conflict, then you have a responsibility to care enough to communicate in person. You've probably heard me say before, 70%, this is from a study, I didn't make this up, 70% of communication is nonverbal. That means it comes with tone, it comes with volume, it comes with facial expressions and body language. If you're in the same room, you can be talking to somebody and you can see when they glaze over. You can see when they get exasperated. You can tell when they say, okay, at the end of what you've said, and they don't mean, okay. But in text or social media, you have no idea. You also don't know how hurtful you can be. You also don't know if somebody's responding or not. So best case scenario, your ceiling in those areas, whether it's text or online, whatever it is, your ceiling of communication effectiveness is 30%. Almost none of us would do anything at 30% capacity and say, I killed it. I mastered that thing. I couldn't possibly be improved upon. in that venue. At 30%, you almost have to say, I couldn't possibly have been clear with my 30%. It's just not possible. So especially if you send a text and you know something comes back rough, immediately stop, call, because at least then you get tone and inflection and volume, and set up a time where you can be face-to-face. Until meeting face-to-face is possible, resist the urge to correct someone. What really is the point? Maybe, just like probably most of us would never stop somebody in public and say, hey, hold on. In front of everybody, you're wrong and you're an idiot and you should, and I'll tell you what. Any leadership guide would say, if you have a problem with somebody else, you pull them aside and you take away the element of humiliation or manipulation or bullying by pulling them aside and saying, hey, because I care enough about you, let's get on the same side of the desk. Instead of being adversarial, let's get on the same side of the desk and say, there's an issue over here. How do we come up with a solution for that? So until we can get together, we should resist the urge to correct someone and use that time to discover resources and listen to those who have already spoken on the subject and have put a considerable amount of time and effort into being clear and helpful in regards to the subject at hand. If we aren't, I'm pausing because this is a big statement and I recognize it. So recognize my heart here. If we aren't willing to spend the effort necessary to communicate completely and compassionately, which pretty much means in person, then we should probably admit we simply do not care enough about the other person to do what is necessary and overcome our apathy or laziness in regards to the value and needs of others. So what I'm saying, again, that was a big rambling statement. Until we can meet face to face, we probably should be telling ourselves, you know what? I apparently don't care enough about that other person to get up off the couch, to be inconvenienced in my schedule, to make time for that other person. So maybe I should just step back and not say anything. Because if I cared enough about them and really cared about them and not just about them acknowledging my rightness or my superior intellect and education, then I probably don't have any right or place to speak into their life because I really don't care about them. If we express compassion publicly, I think it feels like people are reluctant right now to speak out in compassion because they'll find out that somebody will attack them later and say, oh, what you didn't know about this situation was, so you shouldn't be sticking up for them. If we, particularly as the people of God, if we express compassion publicly and it turns out we didn't have enough information on a topic or a person necessary to be expressing our love in a perfect fashion, recognize we're likely to be forgiven and at least viewed as someone who is eager to care. But if we're waiting to have enough information to decide whether or not we should express compassion, that moment may never arrive. Plus, I can't think of a verse in the Bible where we are encouraged to be careful and do all the right research before we decide who exactly deserves love and compassion. Jesus died while we were still sinners. We didn't just disagree with him. We were being active in offending him and killing him for what we had done. And at that time, he did more than sacrifice his appearance in a discussion online or even to be seen with the wrong people. So while we were still sinners, Jesus died for us. Which brings me to the close, which is keep the main thing the main thing. We gotta stop I've told Sherry, my wife, I've told her I'm no longer willing, and I still get sucked into it, so it's not perfect, but I'm no longer willing to argue about something online that doesn't have eternal value. I think that's exactly what Paul was speaking about when he said, don't get caught up in these vain discussions. There's only a couple of things really worth risking and arguing about, and it's somebody else's eternal destination. So keep the main thing the main thing. When Jesus sent out his disciples, he said, heal the sick, raise the dead, and cast out demons. And then just before he commanded us to make before he ascended, he commanded us to make disciples. How much do we believe he loved his disciples? So if we aren't going to do the things on that list that he specifically told us to do, how much more certain should we be before we assign ourselves the extra duties of running around correcting those we don't know and haven't invested enough in relationship to truly care about? In the meantime, everyone has been created by God in his image, and they deserve kindness and respect. And when somebody else is not treated with kindness and respect, regardless of what we know about them or their situation, our spirit inside us, the Spirit of God inside us, should rise up and say, that person is created in the image of God, and Jesus died for them. And no one deserves to be treated that way, no matter what they did. Jesus said specifically to the people who killed him, not who were responsible for putting him on the cross. I'm talking about the guys who nailed him there. He said, Lord, forgive them. They don't have any idea what they're doing or the consequences. Sorry. But if Jesus expects us to love our enemies, then who is left for us to treat with callousness and contempt and rebuke? Jesus said he only said what he heard the Father say to him. And if we're following his example and believe he is truly asking us to correct or rebuke someone, and we know that all prophecy or speaking on behalf of God is meant to build up others, which is what Paul told us, then how grieved should we be to have to deliver correction or rebuke to others? It should shatter us to know what that would mean for their future and their fate. Statistically speaking, most Christians will only lead one person to Jesus in their lifetime. That's based on the idea that the average church is 80 people, and most churches only make one actual conversion a year. And so if most of us live about 80 years, that means each of us will get one opportunity to do that. And actually, that's an average. So that means most of us don't do it at all, and some people do more. Statistically speaking, though, most Christians will only lead one person to Jesus in their lifetime. And with that track record, do we really have the credibility to direct others to completely change their lives, especially when we don't even know them? We could make the case that God's word contains its own power to change others, which it does. However, Paul would have included that in his statement when he exhorted us that if we speak on behalf of God but don't have love, we're still simply annoying. Remember, our opening scripture today was 1 Corinthians, starting in verse 1, and it talked about all that. If I could speak all languages, earth, angels, had the gift of prophecy, if I understood everything God had that he was holding secret, if I had all knowledge, if my faith could move mountains, if I gave everything I had to the poor, sacrificed my body, but I didn't love others, I am nothing. What I've gained is nothing, and it's simply just annoying. Here's my next point, though, or my last point. That is immediately followed by, all that I just read is immediately followed by what you've heard, that love is patient online and in conversations with others. Love is not jealous or boastful or proud or rude when we post a meme. Sorry. It does not demand its own way when it types in caps. It is not irritable when it posts anything, literally anything, online. It keeps no record of being wronged, and it does not rejoice about injustice or tell somebody why somebody deserved to be treated unjustly, but it rejoices whenever the truth wins out. Love never gives up, never loses faith, is always hopeful, and love never fails. And then right after that, a couple sentences later, these three things will last forever: faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love. If we aren't carrying faith, hope, and love into every situation, every interaction, we are settling and we are falling short. These ideas should drive and shape all our interactions. So let's pursue God and understand his heart for those we disagree with or who have hurt us. Then let's pursue others who look and think like us, and more importantly, those who don't. We pursue the kingdom of heaven because that is where the power of God comes from to do this, what feels like impossible thing right now. And we pursue the kingdom of heaven because his kingdom is big enough for everyone. All colors, all ethnicities, all thought predispositions, all the people who agree with us and all the people who don't. Others are worth contending for, even when it means protecting them from ourselves. So let's do it together. Jointhepursuit.net. See you there.